All right. I think we are good to go here. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar here. Hopefully everybody had a good lunch or good breakfast, depending on where you are. But I'm Scott Gutterman. I'm the Senior Vice President of Digital Operations and Broadcast Technologies here at the PGA Tour. I'm excited to talk about AI and fan engagement today with everyone. We have a great panel here today. So we've got people, we've got a group of us, one from a league being myself. We've got Shripal Shah, who's the Chief Digital Officer at Next League. So we have somebody from a services company. We've got Darshan Kaler, who's from Tradable Bits. So we've got a software and services vendor with us. And we've got Asheesh Kinra, who is the CTO at the Baltimore Ravens and is going to bring us the team perspective on fan engagement and AI. So should be a good conversation this afternoon. We'll go for about 40 minutes, and from there, we'll probably take about 20 minutes of Q&A or maybe 15 minutes of Q&A. So while we're having our discussion, get your questions ready, and please feel free to put them into the Q&A, and we'll address them as we kind of get to that section of the discussion. So with that, I'm going to start by letting each of the gentlemen introduce themselves a little bit further, talk a little bit about what they're doing with their organizations. And so, Asheesh, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Yeah, pleasure to meet everybody. Asheesh Kinra, Vice President of IT for the Ravens. And we have been really, diving deep into Gen AI. I mean, it's been exciting times with all sorts of various outputs and ways that it can incorporate in your organization, and a lot of piloting and experimental opportunities to see where we can land and have business value throughout the organization.
Great. Thank you, Asheesh. Darshan, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm Darshan Kaler, co-founder and CEO of Tradable Bits. We work with sports and music entertainment industry globally. At this point, obviously, AI and the use of AI and anything associated with data and fan intelligence in any way. We're working with a lot of our clients leveraging overall platform data to maximize that. So looking forward to having this chat.
Cool. And Shripal?
Hi, I'm Shripal. I'm the Chief Digital Officer here at Next League, driving our AI strategy, marketing technologies, and innovation for our clients. I also write the AI playbook column for John Wall Street, and previously published a few books on AI and sports. And long time ago, worked with Darshan and Asheesh when I was Chief Strategy Officer of the what was now the Washington Commanders. So,
great. Well, thank you guys for joining us today and engaging in this conversation. I think we want to lay a little bit of a groundwork as we kind of get started, because we're going to be using the term AI an awful lot. And these days, when people say AI, often they're referring to generative AI, which a lot of us have gotten into over the last 24 to 36 months as it's become more publicly available. But also, I think when we're talking about AI today, you'll be hearing us talking about machine learning as well, too, in a lot of cases, and really talking about it as an umbrella set of definitions. So there are opportunities in both places with both types of AI, as we've all found in our organizations. So I want to make sure that we'll try to be clear about that as possible, and we'll try to keep the word agentic down to a minimum as much as we can. Although we will certainly be talking about agentic AI as we go through this as well, too. The other part of this is that as we go through the discussion, I think two other areas of focus we'll be talking about AI as it's certainly focused on fan engagement, and how are we using AI to either scale coverage or to engage fans in new and fascinating ways. But we'll also be talking about AI operationally and how it's impacting our organizations and what our organizations are doing with AI to help improve, help assist our staff, help improve processes and find efficiencies throughout the organization, too, as a lot of us have been very focused on that pretty much as we are in engaging our fans, using the tools to engage our fans. So with that said, I think we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Shripal and Darshan, really, why don't we start with you guys, and why don't you both talk about, and Darshan, maybe you go first. Let's talk about how are clients coming to you? What kind of projects and reasons are they coming to you to talk about use of AI and fan engagement? Really, what is that you're focusing on to kind of drive those conversations and help them on their journey or begin a journey that may be using AI as a tool?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, like most of the clients that we're dealing with, are overwhelmed. There's a lot of AI noise. It is a technology that is transforming in everything that we do, both from internal operations all the way down to data management, right? So, um, at the onset of discovery, as Asheesh kind of mentioned, that this is not a unique space. Everybody, I think, any corporation is feeling this, especially more so for the sports and entertainment side of the business. Data itself, in the last, I would say, 10 years, there's a lot of data in the sports industry. Similar on the music side, and really how the data is organized is really the biggest challenge I find. Data hygiene is basically what I call it. How do you get into a scenario where you're really getting to the point where the data is going to provide you value, and is it actually the right data that you're actually utilizing? Overall, by leveraging this type of modeling, certainly you can kind of reduce fan churn, automate sponsorship reporting, basically everything from delivery of ROI. So really at the onset of a lot of our clients, we start with the first question: what is the outcome that you want to do? What is the change that you want to happen? And then we start talking about data and the combination of automation associated with those things.
Great, great. Shripal, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think very similar, right? We find when properties are sort of right being overwhelmed, there's a bunch of areas, right? It's I need help writing my AI policy, or I need help, evaluating it. I'm not sure what uh, generative AI platform should be the baseline for the org. Should it be ChatGPT? Should it be Copilot? Should it be something else? How's governance? And then it's like I don't know where to start in terms of the roadmap. Very similar to you know, what Darshan was saying. And then it's how do I uplift um, our staff with training or, recommendations. So we find properties could be dealing with all five of those things or a few of those, right? And I think what we are trying to do in a very similar way is like, let's start with the problems worth solving and not obsess on the tools. Let's identify the bottlenecks that drain time or revenue. Let's use AI for, visible, measurable, quick wins. So that builds the confidence to want to double down on bigger, more impactful things. And then let's work from the own data first, ticketing, fan sales data as your foundation, and try to get them to avoid chasing things like big data or other areas and really focus on that high quality, actionable view first, because they really need that leg to stand on before they really take a deep dive. And that kind of can help prevent chasing the shiny objects or feature set syndrome and really set the foundation for a true roadmap and strategy. So that's kind of how we're seeing it.
Right, right. And Asheesh, as someone who's inside an organization that may be looking, to make decisions on how to bring AI in, how's it been for the Baltimore Ravens, adopting AI practices, or even determining, like what both, Darshan and Shripal are talking about, like is determining what business problem am I trying to solve here, or what opportunity am I trying to create for the Ravens, and bringing that in house.
Yeah, I think AI, machine learning, has been around for a while, for us a decade. Generative AI came out, and it was like, wow, what all can it do? And to the points earlier, where are quick wins to show trust and value within it? And starting off, we were like, okay, what are easy wins that we could do that takes away from something that employees don't want to do? So we started internally first, within our org, and said, could we add the ability to do code review and code correction for our developers and other entities that are writing code? So we started with Copilot for GitHub as a start into generative AI, and took that win and said, oh, wow, that's good. It's actually helping me correct code, and it's doing things for me that, typically it would take longer to do. Then pivoted to that to, meeting notes. Nobody likes to take meeting notes. They're never accurate usually. So finding the right tool that could do that and eliminate work for them. And added to that, then we went to, could it do metadata tagging? So from our contracts to our photos to other content, and making that increased value to then being able to pivot that back to the fan, right? To now this new story comes up, now we have auto tagging, we can search all our content and provide new content for our fans. And then added and added and added. IT, we don't like to do documentation. Could we get something that helps automate documentation? And so again, each different business unit trying to find quick wins, valuable adds to them that doesn't take away from what they're doing already well, but only again complements and provides trust in the data and outputs that are coming out. And from there, building upon that. So then we looked at some opportunities for fan-facing technologies. We went to chatbots, right, to quickly answer questions of parking, ticket, stadium opportunities, personalizing email outreaches for ticket renewals, and that helped increase engagement. It had automatic follow-ups and qualifying leads and then passing it to a human, right, to make sure they're closing the deal appropriately. So areas of that, trying to add value, and then again taking the meeting notes and now creating AI workflows and saying, let's just not just take the notes and make it available, but let's also insert it into the correct CRM account, accurate data quality, and then over time we're seeing that we'll stack a bunch of different new data from again these conversations to create now a coach agent that can teach new sales and service reps as they come into the organization standards and ways that have been successful through all of this content and collection of information.
Got it. Now that seems very similar to some of the work that we've been doing here at the tour too. Asheesh, as you were going through this, one thing came to mind that you and I share a common responsibility for is our players, right? You're there to support not only the fans but the football players, the football player operations. We have to support our PGA Tour players here as well too. I'm curious as to if you've approached, if there are any projects or any opportunities that you see on the player side for using AI tools as well too.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, AI does a really good job in learning and teaching. So, we give playbooks and all sorts of information to players, that they're supposed to learn and understand. And, you sign a player on Tuesday and we have a game on Thursday. How are they going to get up to speed? So are there opportunities to turn playbooks and other information into generative and teaching exercises for players? We haven't done that yet, but that's an area of opportunity that we're looking at. And we want to tread lightly when we're talking about players and obviously fans and things like that. So we're testing things out, and we're hoping to get to that endpoint at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, we similarly here, we have responsibility to support our players, and we're player driven league. And with what we're doing is we just recently rolled out a new app platform for our players that basically gives them all their video, all their statistics post round every round. And one of the things that we're beginning to investigate now is what if we created an agentic situation for the players, where if somebody's rolling off the course and they're looking for a specific set of stats every time they come off the course, can a report be generated for that player that gives them an understanding about how they performed against their expectations on that course as well too. And I think eventually we'll get into the video side of it as well too, with analysis, swing analysis, and comparative swing analysis, from either maybe throughout a round or from round to round or from year to year, depending on what the player wants to do. So we're just at the very beginning of that. We had to get the base platform in place for them, which is what we've done now, which is really something we're looking forward to. Shripal, why don't we go to you and talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges that you see people facing when you start on these engagements, and things that you need to overcome within an organization that help people begin to see the value of what it is to use AI to either engage fans or to change operations, and talk a little bit about what you see in that space.
Yeah, I think the key thing, I think, in terms of I think you've all seen it, and you've touched on this, is 80% of the AI adoption is going to be culture, 20% on the tech. And we have to be able to be transparent on we as an org or your organization is going to go on a journey. There's some level of volatility and variability, and there is some angst. And it's how do you really, you know, take that on the front end? Because, the leadership has to really model the curiosity, right, within the org. And that I think when they share their stories, it creates a top-down effect. We had a client where the team president was using Perplexity for major sort of announcements with signings and things, and and in sharing how they were using that was really intriguing. We've heard that from a lot of team presidents actually, where they're using these AI tools on the back of events. And I think when those type of stories or anecdotes are passed, downstream, or when someone had to present to ownership and the ownership says, well, what does AI think about that? Sharing those stories really creates that confidence. So I think when the leadership team can share real world examples, potentially even prompts, and the results, that really creates a great momentum boost. The transparency builds confidence because the mystery can, really drive fear. And I think you want what we've seen with the ones that have really gone forward, they've normalized experimentation, saying that we're going to take a few swings. Some are going to be misses, some are going to be hits, some are going to be, singles, and reward those small pilots and not just look for perfect outcomes. And I think, when a organization can see I read the stat somewhere, see their executives using AI, they're 2 to 3 times more likely to adopt. So this is one of those situations where previously for social media, it would be the youngest people in the organization or the most junior people that would go to it first, and the most senior people would do it last. I think in the case of AI, it's almost critical that the senior most folks are actually right at the forefront. And we've really been fortunate that with the teams that we're really working with, from the top of the org, they really have that support, and it's really been demonstrative. But I think that's something that is really unique here. And I think the research has shown that over the last couple of years, that when the folks at the top of the organization are really demonstrating that, it really creates that halo effect downstream.
Right. And it's a matter, I think, in this particular case, because people have either trust issues or concerns that, they're looking for permission, right? And you're going to look up for the permission to do these things and what and how to do these things. So I think I agree with you with that it is one of those things that needs to, in this particular case, sometimes needs to be led from the leadership of the business.
Yeah, Scott, one thing I want to add to that. I think, you know, uh, I think the goal isn't having AI. I think that sometimes that's the first attempt. Everybody goes, we need to have AI, and I've heard it sometimes top-down approach, right? But they don't really know what it is. And I think from what we've experienced through, year and a half of doing this, specifically is, it's really to use it responsibly to drive efficiency, as Asheesh indicated, and make better decisions. Like, I think if you wrap it around that, it becomes a lot easier. And she gave, I don't know, lots of examples, which is awesome. It wraps around the fact that these are exactly the right approach to kind of find those wins. And then, Shripal, just kind of drive home, I think AI succeeds only when people trust it, right? Like a year and a half ago, I didn't trust it at all. It lied to me 50% of the time. And so I'm not saying it doesn't lie to me, but, or, it doesn't tell me, it might bend the truth, but at the end of the day, I think the confidence is there, right? It becomes more an assistant as a staff that's within your group. And it's not really a threat. It shouldn't be considered that. So it is cultural alignment when people start seeing it as another player in your team that'll make you more efficient and be better at your job, right? So that, I think that's the main thing that I kind of want to drive home, and some of those examples are excellent to show it.
That's exactly right. Darshan, when we were prepping, one thing that you brought up was, when people bring these expectations of using AI, they often expect the whole model to be of advantage to them and to use the breadth of what the models have to offer, or what not even a model, but just a simple services platform have to offer. But I think one of the things that you brought up that we were talking about is really starting with your owned data, right? When we say owned data here, I think it's another definition. We say data, we not only mean the data that might come out of one of our sports, or coming out of it, measuring how many people are buying tickets for something or engaging, but also we're talking about content, right? We're talking about video content, we're talking about other things. So can you talk a little bit about like what it means to start, maybe instead of trying to go wide, maybe talk about, starting with your own data, and, Shripal also talked about this too. Talk about what it means to start with your own data, maybe starting narrow.
Yeah, and to everything that we're talking about is that leveraging AI to kind of provide some context. The beauty of a lot of the training models out there is that it takes this, talked about this boiling the ocean. They take all this information and just brings it all in. But really, how you look at the information might be different depending on the context. And that drives everything from is this a music type of an event? Is it a content that we're actually ingesting is specifically tied to purchasing a hot dog versus a ticket purchase and so on. So when we take a look at data, it not only takes a look at metadata on content that's being consumed and by the fan, but also how the fan is participating in every transaction. And that's for us, that's the clients in this case, the team's data. And when you wrap around that knowledge and providing that as context to any LLM or any of the AI strategy you're doing, it definitely defines and answers differently. And what I mean by that is that if you just say, here's a whole bunch of data, and then tell me what statistical analysis for this outcome is, it may not give you the right answer because it's just using mathematics to deploy some analysis to a bunch of data. But once you provide context around that data, which is really unique to each team, that becomes part of the equation, part of the recipe to really maximize that agentic solution.
That's right. That's right.
And I would just
yeah. Go ahead.
Just one quick thing. I think just building on that, when we've been doing training with the different orgs, what we find is we teach this concept of sort of persona and persona switching. So just to Darshan's point, you can add, for anyone, for all the people watching, you can actually create a persona that could even elevate yourself. Like in my case, I could say I was an SPJ 40 under 40, whatever, and I was at all these other places that I never did in my career, and it will actually change the output. And then if I wanted to then actually role play it for my audience, it will actually then tell me how the audience rated that and adjust the content again. So this idea of actually uh, context switching and persona basing in how you interact with it is a very powerful concept. And I think Darshan's spot on, and I would highly recommend that to anyone that's really trying to just jump in today. I think the more you can tell it about yourself and the org in a safe enterprise platform, it is dramatic what the output could be. So I just wanted to just share.
Yeah. And I'll share, Scott, just one thing. It blew my mind when I really discovered that opportunity. I'm an engineer by trade, even though I'm CEO of this company, but it's like it gets into a scenario where I wanted to ask our solution, basically our agentic AI, to kind of go and say, tell me something I don't know. Right. And I've already given it the foundation of all the things that I've been searching. Tell me something I don't know that I haven't seen associated with these data points. And I was surprised when it came through a logic discussion through that assistant, basically at this point, conversation that got me to question things that I was like, this can't be right. I'm looking at the data. I'm like, I don't think that's true. And they allowed me to go and actually deep dive into it, which I think sometimes we have all those blind spots. And so it gives you that flexibility to really stretch the opportunity that you might have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Asheesh, want to come to you again, because I think you and I have had responsibilities in our organizations about governance and IP. And I'd be interested to hear how you and your organization have approached that, because using these tools and models, everything else comes with a degree of risk, and a degree of IP risk that we all have to address. And I'd be interested to hear how the Ravens have managed it.
Yeah, no, and it's a good segue talking about using your own data, right? There's all this preparation that you have to do and work internally with your legal staff and, other counterparts internally to create an AI policy, right? Making sure, to your point, the rules and what data should not be scanning through AI, sensitive information that can cause, you know, issues down the road if social security numbers are getting scanned through, date of birth, and all those type of attributes that you don't want it to scan through and create new outputs that now you have to protect those outputs, and is it getting in the wrong hands of people? So creating an AI policy, working with your legal team, training the staff on what you can and can't do and how to utilize AI is really
Regularly
important.
reminding the
Very
staff what they
early
can and can't do.
before you enable licensing, right? And then from the back end, like I was just mentioning, scanning your environment, identifying where that data lives, putting in the policies in place to ensure you're not scanning sensitive information or, to your point, IP information. And the IP information, IT is not defining that, right? That's legal and the business owner units defining what is critical and what is IP information for them. And then going around and updating your data to label it that way, right? So that way, then it's prepared, you're ready to go. Then you look at data quality. Do I have 5 versions of Excel, about my fan data or whatever we're talking about? Have we cleaned that up each department individually to where now I can scan and use it and trust it? And are the permissions set appropriately? So I think those key points. And then outside of that, before you start using it, do you have traceability and auditability on all the prompts and outputs in case of investigations or other things that could come up later down the road? Being prepared for all that up front is really important before you start enabling and going down and just giving it out, right, to your whole staff. But I think the excitement comes is once you've done all that hard work and then you're able to give it out. Who knows where it's going to go, because they're creative minds in your organization, and really a lot of great ideas come from, throughout your staff. It's not necessarily top down.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it's the way, trying to empower people without putting too much restrictions or bureaucracy in place to enable them to do that, but also to remain, protective of the organization. That's something we've been very focused on here. A lot of the projects that we get engaged in here as well too is we make sure that we're in control of the environments in which things run, and making sure that we're not necessarily working with open APIs that are parts of larger models, and making sure that we are with models that are either sequestered or in environments that we can manage as well too. And so, creating that environment and that development discipline as well has been a big part of what we have been doing. Quick reminder, because we're just coming up on almost on 1:30 here. If you have questions for us in about 10 minutes, we're gonna turn to the Q&A and start taking those questions. So feel free to go ahead and get those loaded in. As we get into what we were just talking about, Shripal, I guess, you heard what Asheesh just outlined. You go into an organization and, you explain to them, they're very excited about what they want to do with AI, or they found, even more appropriately, they have a business, objective that AI may be a suitable tool for, or some form of that may be. How do you balance the, I want to get started and go grab a model or go grab a set of tools, with the, like, look, we need to do the things that, Asheesh just outlined, and make sure that your data is ready and in a place where it can be used by these tools, because that can often take some time.
Yeah, and I think, having seen sort of the AI enablement outside of sports, which was, like in retail and other areas that was ahead, I think, when we talk to an org, it's a few things. And I'll get, I'll start from where we were to segue into this is, governance isn't just on the front end. It's not just about the AI policy. It really requires that continuous look as to what's working, what isn't, what are people, doing the prompts, right? It requires that constant sort of touch point by those, cross-functional stakeholders, because that's going to really create sort of the baseline. I say that because I think when you think of a roadmap, there's ways where if you think everything is equal, that well, then you've got a lot of prep. What we try to do is really get people to think about concepts. And there used to be the social media meme of the professor with the jar with the pebbles, rocks, and boulders and the sand. And what we really try to do um, is really think about problem sets in that way, right? What are pebbles? What are rocks? What are boulders? What are the hero use cases? And that came out of my experience working in an enterprise org that's doing billions of dollars, where the CTOs would be focusing on the boulders and say, well, we're tapped out. And then they'd say, well, if I knew I just needed to give you access, I would have done that 3 months ago. If I knew I just had to give you one developer, I would have done that 2 months ago. So what we say is really important to size the opportunity and then look at a blend over your 90 days. And what that does is everything Asheesh said is right, but you're going to find the degree for the prep or the infrastructure foundational work will vary, and that allows you to really move forward across multiple planes, because there'll be some things that where the data governance and the setups are really there or not applicable as much as other things. And that will then help determine the sequencing and the prioritization and really just get people going. Because right now people are sometimes um, it's like paralysis, like almost me right now trying to speak,
Right.
of like, where do you actually start? So it's like, we just not to go. Because if we list all the things that can't be done, we'll never move forward. And I think um, I worked for an org, where I worked for the program series where we laid up thousands of people. And, it was in this experiment where the CTO would say, I have 1,100 hours of sysadmin work that we got to do every month. I don't have enough staff for that. But if we only focus on that, you never would have moved forward. So I give him credit in understanding, like, there's going to be some things that we're going to let go, and there's some things we're going to move forward and try to run, sort of keep the lights on while we're also trying to innovate. And I think that bifurcated approach is really helpful in large scale organizations, because sometimes you just have to take a leap in a focused area just to start moving. Because if you really list all the things that aren't done, it could be 18 months before you get started. And by then, we're talking about what's going to ultimately be table stakes and then parity, and how are you going to really move past that?
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Darshan, I think for you, I'll bring it back to fan engagement, because Tradable Bits is very focused on helping organizations really build engagement platforms, and helping to kind of draw out initiatives are built around seasons or built around events, whether that's a festival or a sporting event. And I'm curious to know, how are you beginning to apply these learnings in AI against fan engagement and helping organizations reach their goals for marketing or other initiatives?
Sure. First, I kind of want to identify some things that I tell people that are common mistakes. It's just what AI can do, and without some of these things, it's a really important context. So first of all, well, mistake number one, we don't come in and say our solution's better than anything out there. It's not about deploying tools, it's defining goals, right? And I think when we look at fan engagement and all that, there's this I don't know, panacea, it'll do everything for me, where that's super scary to me. Even I know what the context could potentially imply. So I'm just like, okay, deploying tools before defining goals, I think it's a mistake. And then ignoring data and privacy, just going back, if there is no set policy in place, we always ask, okay, well, what is possible to do? Because we're leveraging their data, and making sure that there's fan consent associated with that use. And so that's mistake number two, if people don't even think about it, or bring that up. And then mistake number three is like, okay, we got all these data, expecting AI to basically fix bad data. Hell no, I wouldn't want that to happen at all. So So once we accept those foundations of that people always constantly think that that's what it's going to do, I'm like, okay, now let's say those are kind of check boxes we all agree that we're not going to do. Then, then we take a look at, well, what would make it more interesting? And we want to get to personalization at scale. And there might be certain types of goals, defining goals that as a human being, what would matter to me as a fan as I come into a venue, or maybe I never go into a venue and I just watch from at home. And can we do that at scale? And really, we still have to compartmentalize the goal. And so if it's associated with a sponsorship, then we define the set opportunity to make that engagement far more interesting through that knowledge of understanding what the vendor is looking for from the sponsorship perspective and the client from brand perspective, and then making sure that there's alignment associated with that, where the fan doesn't feel like their information was overly used. So once we have kind of that set in place, then there's a whole bunch of different ways to engage fans, everything from surprise and delight if they come into a venue, and we know that they have interest associated with certain types of food, all the way down to having a person that comes in the door the first time they've ever been in the venue, right? You want to treat them differently. And I think today a lot of that is being utilized in segments and kind of, in chunks of work. And that's a good first step. But that's also applies on the agentic side. What can we let machines handle repetitive work so that humans can focus on better business decisions? And so those are the things that we want to try to drive. So in our approach for using AI within the fan engagement, it's all about those manual steps first, and then figuring out, okay, can we then rinse and repeat? And that becomes kind of the model moving forward for other things that we kind of expand on.
And Darshan, I like the way you started, which was, I wrote down what you said. It's now not about deploying tools, it's about defining goals. And I think that's initially, frankly, all of us in our positions, that's really what we are responsible for the business, right? Because we know we can go get tools to help us solve a bunch of problems, and there's lots of options. But I think you're right. Like starting with the why are we doing this? What are we trying to accomplish is really kind of what needs to drive everything. All right, we're getting down here to the last few minutes of the talk, so I want to finish it up with, we're going to ask you the easy question. We're going to start with you, Asheesh. Project out a year, 2 years, where do you think, or you can project out a little further if you like, where do you see kind of AI taking your organization, or the opportunities that AI is going to present to your organization there at the Ravens?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, given that every few months there's a new announcement of something happening. So who knows in 12 months? But I'd say, as we're just talking about agentic, right? And how does, again, we start to use like the new protocols that are in place. So Google came out with A2A, right? Agent to agent across various platforms. So right now we're talking about agentic typically within one platform, and having these agents start to really work together to solve real problems across platforms. And I think that can just open up a lot of opportunity as data is diverse in multiple different systems. So I think that's one big area. And for us, like, again, as it gets a lot better, is can we make, former players, Hall of Fame type style, engaging with, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and all the former players and potential current players, and having them, be their own person, right? Own digital persona.
Nice. I agree with you there. Darshan.
Well, it depends on the day when I wake up. Sometimes I'm scared, sometimes I'm excited. So I think really for me, AI is a new interface. No different than, keyboard, touchscreen, and those are physical layers on how we interact with computers. So I believe AI is going to change the way we can see it already, how we interact with computers, phones, wearables, you name it. And leveraging AI with their own fan data, I believe is a big game changer. I think, AI it won't level the playing field, right? I think it will widen the gap between data rich and data poor teams. I think that's going to be really interesting as the future kind of arrives very, very quickly. And those that haven't done the discovery and the work, I think it's going to be really, really challenged. A2A, like as Asheesh indicated, intelligent agents responding to other agents and so on. I firmly believe in that. I think there's certain components of things that we're building that we know best, but we don't know everything. And so as fans, we want to engage, manage ticketing, personalized offers, real-time offers, all those things are going to be really interesting. And it doesn't mean that it's all under Tradable Bits, but it could be lots of different things that we might have to tap into. And really, bottom line, I think predictive ticketing, forecasting, demand, dynamic pricing. I mean, that's just the reality of life we live in today. I think it's just going to get more sophisticated. But the ones that I'm really interested in is that if I can control as a fan, not necessarily as a business, but as a fan, I can personalize my content and offers. I think there's some of that that's going to come down the pipeline where there's a rather than a delivery mechanism, kind of like a broadcast. I'm going to tell you more. I think I know you well enough. I'm going to give you stuff as opposed to no, actually, this is me. And now with that knowledge, what can you provide me, right?
Yeah.
So I think
that's exactly you're hitting on something I was reading the other day, and I was going to bring up too, which is Reza Martin, who leads Hux and was on Notebook LLM. I was reading something she said the other day, and she's waiting for the tipping point. She likes things to be. She wants to wait and see when is AI going to stop being additive, meaning that you always have to do more for it to get more out of it, to when AI is going to be subtractive, right? And it's exactly to your point, which is like, when is it going to begin to take these things from my plate every day? Or if it knows enough about me, it's going to present those opportunities to me. And I think that tipping point is out there somewhere. I don't know how far out that is. And we may have to spend some time letting these services know more about us before we get there. But I think that's one of the forward-looking areas I'm interested in. Shripal, why don't we finish up with you here, and then we'll jump into questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I agree with both of them, right? We're going to see a shift from generative AI acting as your co-pilot to a context-aware, agent that can act autonomously. The agents will be able to understand your data, tone, and workflow to define that next edge. The data quality is going to really determine the readiness, and that's going to really be the differentiator, right? You're going to ultimately understand like what's the difference between like parity and the innovation. It's going to really be in the data, and who's really mapped that. And I think the teams investing in the infrastructure now are going to be the ones that can deploy those agents at scale. But I think if we're going to end with sort of a future state, I think we're going to see a major shift in marketing. I think we're looking at a point where if we fast forward to next summer, you're going to have sort of that, if you think of a user, right, forget any industry, you're looking at, the classic search, right, the SEO. That's evolving now to people searching on these generative AI platforms, or what you're hearing as sort of GEO, right? So as a brand, you're going to have to think about, how do I show up in these AI agent, how do I show up in the search engine? How do I show up on the AI engines? And then you have sort of the direct answer, right? The what again, I hate these acronyms, but like the answer, engine optimization. But then when you look at what Walmart just announced, and with the browsers, that both Microsoft and OpenAI have announced, you're really now looking at an AI integration optimization. How do I make sure with my catalog of products, how do they actually show up for commerce within these AI platforms? What does that mean, right? So with the Stripe integration into OpenAI, that really opens up the whole uh, e-commerce uh, ecosystem. And I think you're going to see more of that. And I think that's going to be something that will really, really come to a head. And that's going to change how you then market your entire sort of marketing mix. Because now you're going to have to really think about these channels, which will then, have a dramatic effect in terms of how you look at your earned and owned and social channels. So I think everything we talked about today, the net effect is a year from now, it's going to have a material effect in terms of how marketers have to shift. And the technology foundations are going to be critical in terms of how you drive that actual marketing.
Got it. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for your insights. I'm gonna jump here to the questions. Actually, what I'll do is I'll read out a question and then maybe pick somebody out. And if somebody else wants to add something to it, then you guys can do that. But it looks like we have about 11 questions here. So we'll try and get through them in the next 15 minutes. So from Jonathan Liskoff, with so many AI tools out there in the ecosystem, how do you go about selecting the one for your organization? Actually, I'm going to start with Asheesh on that one and see what they've done there at the Ravens.
I think, start with the problem, right? Like, what are you trying to solve? And then what tools are in that space? What's your environment? Are there synergies, or are you going to have integration issues with it? How do you make it simple? Again, like we talked about, to get rolling, get started, have a quick win. So I think it's a good question, but it's a tricky one because it just depends on, right, what are you trying to solve, and then what is established and mature tool out there.
Let's see here. We've got Christina Vanderbeck with a question to Asheesh, actually, again to you. You've mentioned a lot of different AI implementations, code review, auto tracking, data capture, documentation, note taking, led by different business unit. I'd love for you to pick one and walk us through how it went from ideation to activation. How was it received and supported internally? And what ended up being the biggest challenge in getting it to stick?
Well, that's a good question. I think so. A lot of these, implementations that we did, we weren't doing. So it was kind of easy to get rolling and get things moving in terms of note taking or documentation or some of the back end stuff that we were doing with tagging, meta tagging, eliminating humans and getting faster outputs. I think the one that was really collaborative and that kind of came to us from our ticketing department was that ability to kind of reach more fans as we're getting to renewal points and different areas throughout the year where we need to engage and reach more fans. And so that personalization, email outreach was a collaborative effort. They brought it to us. We reviewed it. We looked in the market, right? Who is an established player? How does it fit in our ecosystem? Can we trust the outputs? Doing a small proof of concept, validating, what can happen. Does ticketing know the rules that they want to implement? So that was a lot of back and forth, right? To make sure, again, all that is documented and detailed and thorough before rolling it out. And then after rolling it out, like anything else, you're going to review and make audibles, as fast as possible to get a more accurate return rate on that engagement. So that was one that was interesting. And now we're looking at how can we expand in that area? What are other areas of opportunity within the space engaging with fans automatically? And to kind of Darsh's point earlier was, really making sure everything is personalized. So not only now of just, email outreach and that initial conversation, but then as they come to the game, are the offers what they're looking for? Do they like Ravius chicken? Give them Ravius chicken. All those type of things are the next steps towards that. But a lot of collaboration between departments.
Thank you, Asheesh. I think this next one is aimed at you and I. So where do you see the largest gaps within the current AI tool set and what your organization's needs? For me, I'll start, and Asheesh, you can take it. It's for me, it's two things that I constantly kind of have to deal with when we're looking at a tool set to solve a problem or people approaching us about an opportunity. One is that we talked lightly about this here, but it's context, and it's context services. If we're looking to produce something like live shot commentary or things like that, the models, the tools generally don't have context for live golf. We're finding that in general, they don't have context for live sports. Like in live golf, for a while, and even so, unless we've built a set of context services here, and we have built them, is it didn't know the difference between a putt that went 5 feet past the hole and a putt that was left short because it thought 5 feet was short. And so on the fly, we have to be able to do that. Or even something more simple, which is don't start reporting on the longest drive of the day until half the field is on the course, because every first drive is the longest drive of the day, right? So those are the things that we're finding that uniquely we have to bring to the table, that a SaaS service is generally not going to bring to the table, and the models certainly don't understand. They can tell you what golf is by definition, but they can't tell you what golf is by playing. So that's one for me. The other one, which is, we touched on it here a little, is IP protection. I find a lot of vendors and tools will come to us and we'll find that they're actually passing data, often not hashed or in any way that's protected, into the larger pool of public APIs that are from the larger frontier model companies. And that's something that we have to be very protective against as IP owners. I don't want my video or my data or my stats being passed into those models unless there's a proper protections or proper business relationship put in place, or even in some cases a rights fee. And so those things that we are constantly dealing with here at the Tour. I don't know, Asheesh, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I think you said it really well right there, because both of those hit with us, right? It is that context and providing how we want those outputs and explanations to happen. And then two, how do we do our sensitive workloads where we don't want it, to your point, to run through a model or get known? So having a localized environment as well is just part of the tool set that you're going to need at some point.
Perfect. Let's see here. So Leonardo Barreto, working with fan engagement data is frequently the entry door for professionals into the sports business industry. How do you see AI impacting this and making it harder for people early in their career to get into our industry? Since it's fan engagement data, Darshan, I'll start with you there on that one.
I don't know. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so there's no better time than to start today, right? So I think the reality is that when new technology emerges into an ecosystem like ours, anything is possible. I think you can have a solution be done, by a person that's working in a garage because they're deploying and leveraging a new way to look at how to deploy services and stuff like that, right? So I think it's actually so much more exciting today than I would say if you were starting 20 years ago to try to do these things. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of the technology stack that you need to. Everything is somewhat readily available. I think you need to have a right partner. I think you have to have the right solution deployment, trust, and all that type of stuff. So I think for me, like the fan engagement, if you're starting today, there is a level playing field available to everybody, and it's really just taking a look at, starting with small wins and then building upon those and then adding more on top of that. And that could be just anything from starting a new company entirely, or an existing team that may feel like they don't have, they're not the big enterprise sports agency or sports technology group, but you could kind of do a lot of those things today with minimal services that you might can easily kind of turn up today. So,
thank you. Let's see. Next question is not from an anonymous person. There's been talk about personalizing the digital fan experience for years, yet I don't see personalization manifest in the daily fan experience. How can AI help us drive real personalization at scale in a meaningful way?
I think these questions are interesting because personal to us is very different for each person, right? And I find I've come into a space where someone says, "Oh, this is a personal experience for you," and it's terrible. And I'm like, because I would never want my experience to be routed that way. So I think personal experience is gonna. I think we still live in a broadcast world. We're kind of going. We believe, you are, going to go through journey number 1, journey number 2, journey number 3. I think where personalization comes in is when the fan comes back and actually all of a sudden you have 1 to infinite opportunities that can kind of be the outcome. So definitely, I think, I don't know. The last comment that we talked about is that where an outside source on the fan side inputting into the system, I think is going to be the next wave of what I would consider truly fan personalization. I think we have concepts of fan personalization, but not to the level where I think it could be.
I think loyalty is going to drive a lot of that, quite frankly. I think having worked for an organization that went from 1,805 stores down to 5.5 and still drive almost 9 figures in revenue a year ago, that was one of the big drivers. When you can actually create, and as sports is now moving down the loyalty track, that can really drive true one-to-one marketing as sports organizations are looking for these mixed use um, uh, developments adjacent to their stadium. You're going to care less about what they do on game day versus what people do year round. And in that concept, you're going to have to really then need ways to capture people's information with the advent of the different fintech platforms. That's going to drive to really create going from 100, a couple hundred personas and clusters to tens of thousands, if not more. And I think AI is going to allow someone to manage that because that'll be too much for an individual to really handle at scale. And I think you're seeing that already in other industries like retail and hospitality, and that's going to really start coming into the sports space. So I really do believe that if you think of a loyalty construct, it's a lot easier to think about like true personalization, because in the end, loyalty marketing is really just a vehicle for one-to-one personalization at scale.
Good. So we only got probably another minute or two for questions. Asheesh, you got a question from Matt Quinn. A couple of years ago, the Ravens led the charge in the NFL with AR and mixed reality experiences, having the Ravens mascot fly across the field. I remember that. It was really entertaining. With advancements in mobile AI data and tech, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities for fans, whether at the stadium or the couch, to level up their fan experience? How do you monetize it? I know you're not going to be able to answer that question in 3 minutes, but do your best. So.
I'll take the opportunities there, and I'd say, yeah, I think our production team did an amazing job, with that experience of mixed reality, working with our partners, and we've used that again this year, right, for internal. But again, how do we reach all the fans and take advantage of these technology stacks for all of our fans that are at home and not coming to the game? We have 70,000 people coming to the game. We have 5 million fans in our database. There's an opportunity to start utilizing this tech and these opportunities to reach them to the point of on the couch or wherever they are, and extending AR capabilities and to their fan where they could be at home and have Ed Reed and Ray Lewis sit next to them and talk through the game and have an amazing experience. And I think there's more opportunities like that we'll see coming out in the next few years.
Got it. All right. We are at 1:58, so I think I'm actually going to stop the questions there a little bit. There are a few good ones left there, so apologies to everyone. But I do want to thank the panel and thank you for your time. Darshan and Asheesh and Shripal, really appreciate your input. I think the insights that we've had today, it's interesting to have all of us because we all kind of come from different perspectives and teams and leagues and startups and software and services vendors. So I think we've got a really interesting time in helping our organizations and other organizations kind of move into this field. And all the questions today were really good. And the personalization question that was just answered or just asked is the one that I get internally all the time. Is some people joke I've been telling them about personalization for 5 years and they're waiting to see how it will manifest. And I said, well, it's actually manifesting itself in many different ways. So on that note, I wanted to again thank you for the participants. Thank you everyone for sitting in. If you have any questions, you can certainly run them through the Next League team. We'd be happy to answer them and or reach out to us individually on LinkedIn. So everyone, please have a good afternoon, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.